Hello and welcome to the live podcast, Win More on Purpose. Today we have Irit Levi with us on preventing leaky pipes, how to make sure that your sales pipeline is free of cracks. For those of you who don't know, just to go over the agenda of how we're going to do things today, it's going to be a conversation between myself and Mrs. Levi. We're going to be here learning together. So definitely you should be writing down your questions, as I will as well. When we get to the Q&A, there will be a recording for those who might need to leave early. And of course, everything will go up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. In a week's time. For those who are, just coming in, you can put into the chat to start off, what are you focusing on in your business today? Where are you coming in from? Or you can just add what it is that you do. And for those who don't know me, my name is Jakob Steinberg. When I first went into full-time coaching about 4+ years ago now, I realized very quickly people were able to build 6, 7-figure businesses on their own. They're good at what they do. They're passionate. Some point along the way, they learned how to speak to people, and they hit this glass ceiling. And many times it was because sales is very often associated with a used car salesperson. No one wants to be that sleazy, pushy, quintessential individual. And lots of times it had to do with their processes and the lack of strategy. There's only so long that we can wing it. And that's where I came into the picture. Whether it was mindset, techniques, skills, tools, really just helping him to have that confidence and clarity to take it to that next level. I've had the pleasure of helping quite a number of well-known people on LinkedIn, whether it's Chaya Fishman, Hoodie Bloch, Hoodie Greenberger, just to name a few. And a lot of the 6, 7-figure businesses that have come to me have been able to grow by even 50% in the first 60 days of working with me. Those at the 100K mark have been able to grow by even 150% in the first 60 to 90 days. And solopreneurs just starting out, even only at $4,000 a month, have been able to grow by 200, 240% in the first 45 days. And with that, Irit, please tell us a little bit about yourself. And let's get the show on the road.
Thanks so much for having me. In theory, I have, excuse me, a bit sick today. I help businesses simplify their workflows and processes. Sometimes that includes automations, not necessarily. Sometimes it's just understanding who does what, when, and what implications, how long it's going to take, and how it influences the customer journey. When it comes to sales, what will happen oftentimes, you talk about, getting people to have their processes up to date and their tools. But like you said before, Yaakov, people will wing it. And, oh, I just started using this tool. It seems like it works okay. And then, oh, I'll just add this other tool and it seems like it works okay. And all of a sudden you've got this tech stack and you have no idea what does what. How do I get it to work properly? People are scared of automations. They want personalization in their process, and they're scared that if they automate, they'll lose that. So a lot of these things we don't realize. We don't know what we don't know. So we don't realize that if we use the tools to the maximum of their ability and we structure it in a way that is right for our workflow, we can have something that just makes our life so much easier and cuts out all of the manual work. I can't believe I said that word. The M word. Let's just call that the M word from now on.
Sure. Yeah, and it's fascinating because even in my own business, I see this all the time. And it's definitely with those that I work together with. Lots of people are scared of automation. It's not even like the AI thing. It's just like the fact that I'm not going to be in control anymore is terrifying to so many people. And it's a shame because, in our conversations together, well before this podcast, like we've discussed so many different, aspects of people's businesses where they could really benefit from automating different parts of their business and just streamline their own lives and take so much of the unnecessary work out of, what it is that they have to do. The first question that always comes to mind when we're talking about a sales pipeline that I think so many people have is what actually is a sales pipeline? I think a lot of people get confused about this. So let's dive into that.
Yeah. So a pipeline basically defines the customer journey. Some people prefer to call it customer journey rather than pipeline. But it's the different stages that your customer goes through, that you go through, from initial outreach of that customer until you sign them and you onboard them, right? So there's that initial outreach. Maybe you have a meeting, maybe you have a qualification email first, maybe you send them a proposal or a contract or an NDA. There's maybe a research step that you have to go through. Different businesses have different pipelines depending on what the different stages of their service product. In e-commerce, there's a pipeline. It's just very, very fast. You see on the internet, you click buy, you check out, and you're done. When it comes to services, we're a bit more complex.
Right. So a lot of times, when I, and I spoke about this on LinkedIn, we were talking about the podcast, is many people get confused also around what fits into their pipeline, right? So a lot of times it'll start with like, even the lead gen or someone reaching out to you, and it'll end, when they actually close, and then they'll move into, a new process of onboarding and actually helping them. But so many people, I think, also get stuck with parts that are around the sales pipeline. They don't really know who they're talking to. So how could they possibly qualify them? Or how do they know who to talk to, and therefore, even do lead gen? So I think it's extremely important for, laying that down so that people realize what are the steps they need to take. Okay, lead gen's the first step. So now I got to figure out, okay, who do I need to talk to? Let me go find out that information. And now I can start the process. When we talk about sales pipelines, I think a lot of people ask themselves, do I really need this? Right. So who needs a sales pipeline? And then, as a further question, is there a stage in which a business is recommended to get a pipeline, or to have a more structured pipeline, I should say?
Yeah. So first of all, whether you think you need one or don't think you need one, you probably already have. Even if you're just starting out, you just opened your business yesterday, you're like, okay, how am I getting lead gen? I don't talk about lead gen because lead gen comes before the pipeline even starts. How am I getting people into my pipeline? So let's just put that aside for a minute. But once I get people that are interested, be it outbound or inbound leads, what do I do with them? And most businesses have that in their head, even if they don't have it in a tool. It could be, oh, somebody reached out on DM on LinkedIn. Great. I'll respond to them and I'll name. Okay. Yes. That's considered a step. It's a bad step. It's not what I would recommend, but it's considered a step. So that's the first stage of their pipeline. It's how do I capture those initial inbound leads? And then do I schedule a call with them? So how does that happen? Oh, I'll just say I'm available Wednesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. Does that work for you? I'll go, no, like Tuesday at 9 p.m. No, that doesn't work for me. Let's do 11 a.m. That just goes, okay, so how do I get a scheduling tool? And most people use a scheduling tool today and are used to using a scheduling tool today, but many businesses are still afraid of them. So I'm not going to go into the rest of the stages. Just to answer the second part of your question, when should a company start upgrading their pipeline and move away from that notebook? Um, there are two possible answers to that. The first is when you feel you're losing control and that notebook is not enough, you need to be upgrading from that notebook or whatever tool it is that you're using. The tools that you're using are letting things fall between the crack. It's time to upgrade. It's time to move forward to a better tool that suits your needs better. And it really depends on the services, right? It depends on what the tools you're using are and how your process works. So there's no one right answer, but definitely if the tools that you're using now, from a notebook to a proprietary tool, if they're not working for you, it's time to review your process. And I would definitely say that people that are making the kind of money that you talked about in your intro, they're at the stage that they need to be using a pipeline. If you have 2 customers a month, you can handle a notebook. Maybe if you have 4. But when you grow and you start having more customers and more complex projects, and you're all in this notebook or in an Excel sheet, it's going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and you're not going to find what you need. And you're going to be doing a lot of things using that M word, doing them repetitively with human interaction. There we go. That's the word I can use.
Sounds good. Yeah, it's funny because a lot of times I'll tell people that when I get, when they'll reach out to me or things like that, I'll say, you want me to send over my Calendly link, or should we go back and forth, tear it our hair, and then I'll send it to you, right? Because that's really what you're doing when you're trying to do it in that, manual fashion. And I said the M word. When you're doing it in those, those, I don't have a different word for it, but when you're doing it on your own, that's really what you're doing. A lot of times you're creating situations where you want to tear out your hair because there's really no other way of going about it. And a lot of times I tell people that if you're gonna do inbound, and you're letting things come to you, so then definitely whether it's using a notebook or a Google spreadsheet or whatever have you, those can still work. But as soon as you're going to start doing outbound, if you're going to try to reach out to other people, that follow up, even if you're just doing like simple math, 5 people, every day, let's say, is you want to reach out to. Well, that's 25 people in a week or more, depending on how many days you have in your week. And then you have your follow-ups, right? By the following week, you're already potentially reaching out to 10 people every day. And then it's and it starts multiplying itself exponentially, right? So if you are doing that type of work, having, a more robust way of having a pipeline, which will actually be my next question, is I think extremely important at that stage. Would you agree?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily inbound versus outbound. If you have 10 inbound leads coming in, you want to follow up on those as well. You want to follow up
No,
on
for
inbound
sure.
as well. But yeah, any if you start if once you start gaining momentum, you need to find a tool that will suit you and serve you. I remember when I was starting my business and I had multiple notebooks, and I remember at the end of the meeting, I would take my notes. And I mean, now I use Fathom and Fathom summarizes it for me. So I don't really need to do that. But at the end of the meeting, I would be taking notes. And then when I met up with them again, or when I would follow up, I'd have to scroll. It was flip through the notebook going backwards to find when I met them. And I knew that it was time to upgrade when it was more than 2 pages, more than 2 or 3 pages. It was like, oh, wait, where is this? Where is this? Where is this? And I went back like half a notebook because so much had happened since that first meeting.
Right. No, what I meant by inbound versus outbound is, yeah, absolutely. If you have like four people on an inbound, so then you can still stick with those notebooks, like you said earlier. I was saying, as an addition to that, if you have 10 inbound, oh, for sure at that point already you need it. I'm saying a lot of people from the outbound perspective, they don't even, it's not even a conversation at that point, because the second you're starting outbound, even if you only have two inbound every single month, you still need to be able to stay on top of that or things are going to fall through the
Yes.
cracks.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you said, I mean, I came from the sales world, so right away I started with a CRM when I started my own business. But even then, I've always taken a tremendous amount of notes. And initially, putting those notes into the CRM, you have to find the time to do it. And there was a point where I'm just like flipping through pages. Now I only keep a few pages on my desk at a time because I make sure to schedule time to put in my notes. And I use Fathom for the most part to take, any more, pushed out notes that I might need. But I like to, solidify it by writing it down. One of the things that I've always used since when I first started my business in order to, get around this idea is a CRM. And I think a lot of people are confused. What is a CRM? Is it a must? Is this something that everybody should have? So let's delve into a little bit more about what specifically it is and who should have it, or is it something that everybody should have? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
So
No
I was
worries.
muting it before so that we could hear you. So a CRM is a client relationship management or contact relationship management system. Basically, what this does it helps you keep track of all of your contacts. And you're going to go, oh, but I have Outlook for that, or I have Gmail for that. No, no, no. The beauty of a CRM is that it depends which CRM, but proper CRM will track your interactions with said contact. It will track emails. Some CRMs track meetings because they're connected to your calendar. Some will connect it to your notes. Um, some CRMs are connected to your phone. So if there's text messages or WhatsApp messages, you can have them pull in as well. Basically, it pulls all of your interactions with this client into one place. And it means that, because today in today's world, communication is like everywhere. So it just means that you have one central place that you can look at to see where any given client or lead is at any given stage. And the beauty of a CRM is you can define the different stages and say, okay, initial outreach, I'm meeting with them or I'm qualifying them. And then again, this connects to automations and it gives you a lot of power. I just like to say, you mentioned that you take notes in Fathom, but then you also take notes and have time to put them in. If you, for example, let's just improve your workflow here. If you create a form anywhere, Cognito forms, Jot forms, Airtable, whatever kind of form, or if your tool, whatever tool of choice you use has that, do it natively. But if you create a form and at the end of the meeting, you just write the notes, you jot down the notes in the form and you hit submit, it will automatically push those notes to the client as like in the CRM as a summary. And you don't have to take extra time. It takes like 3 minutes at the end of the meeting. And again, you're getting them from Fathom anyway, so you're just copying and pasting, hopefully, what you want. And if you have a paid Fathom account, oh, it gives you next steps. It gives you like an advanced summary. It's really, really powerful and it really works well.
Wow. So when you mentioned the A word, which I will call automation, right? So we're going back to where we started to a certain degree. When it comes to having a CRM, one of the most important parts of that process is, as opposed to a Google Sheet or Excel or a notebook or any of these other processes, this could potentially be a place where all of that information will be aggregated into one, client um, profile where you're able to scroll through and see all the interactions you've had, right?
So again, it really depends on what you're using as a CRM. If you're using a proper CRM like Pipedrive or Copper, then yes. If you're using Salesforce or HubSpot, most small businesses do not need Salesforce or HubSpot. Please stay away from them if you're not big enough to justify. They are monsters. You will be paying for features you will not be using. Or in HubSpot, you won't be paying anything, but then once you have to upgrade, you'll be paying a fortune because their pricing just jumps. So again, think in advance, think ahead. You don't need all of those capabilities as a small business owner. And I say small, I mean, like, again, depends on how many inbound leads are coming. But if you don't have like 50 or 100 inbound and outbound leads, like leads coming in every single day, like I really don't see the purpose of going to something as big as Salesforce. A proper CRM will aggregate all of this information into the customer profile or card or whatever they call it in the CRM. Some people use project management tools as a CRM type setup. So
Right.
they'll use ClickUp or Monday or Asana, or even Airtable, which is a data management tool, but they'll use it just to see the different stages in something called a Kanban board, which is basically just the columns, and the columns give you the different stages. If you don't need to track all of your communication with these potential clients, that's good enough. If you do need to track communications, some tools have the capability, some tools don't. Some tools have partial capability, like Monday and ClickUp partially can. If you send the initial email through ClickUp, then it will track the replies from within the task, but otherwise it won't. So again, you really need to know what it is you need, and based on that, choose the tool that's right for your needs.
Right. And that boils down to understanding what stage you're at and understanding, what is it that you actually need to have versus, oh, that sounds like a really cool feature. I'll just grab that. When in reality, it might be something that you don't need for the next several years. Um, should these things be automated, right? We mentioned that all these things can be automated. We mentioned that the ease of which it will create in businesses and the people who are, using these softwares will get by having it automated. But do you think it should be automated?
The answer to that is it depends. I think certain things should be automated. You talked about follow-up before. Follow-up emails can be automated and personalized. Just use variables.
Right.
And they should be automated. I don't see why, you need to have someone, mm, I can't say the words, say the damn word. You need to have someone manually write an email, basically. It's, hi, we spoke 3 days ago, or I reached out 3 days ago. Or again, you can calculate that in your CRM in a field, in a custom field. And then once you do, the email can just fill that with, I contacted you X days ago. Or if you know that you're reaching out always 3 days after, just write 3 days ago. And you can have custom fields where you set up, okay, do a follow-up after 3 days, do a follow-up after 6 days. And then if the status doesn't change to meeting is booked, send a follow-up again. It saves you time and it saves you brain space. I don't think people understand the value of brain space. It's totally underestimated. If you have to think, okay, wait, who do I have to contact today? Let me go into the CRM, let me go into my notebook, let me go into my Google Sheet and see how many people I reached out to yesterday. Okay, he was yesterday, he was 2 days ago. Like it takes time. And every time you have to start looking at that, your mind has to wrap itself around that. So that's also taking you time, moving from one task to the next. And then, okay, I did one, now let's do the other. No, no, you can automate all of this and it makes your life so much simpler and so much faster.
Right. And I think, again, it goes back to that, what you said in terms of having brain space. So many business owners, especially, are constantly running, right? And it's one of their biggest issues, right? We've spoken about that on this podcast when it came to time management, with Avi Friedman, in the sense that, like, so many people don't make the time to work on their business because they're so busy working in their business. And this is a big part of that, because if you're making yourself more busy just because you want to be in control of sending that email, or however your process works today, and therefore you don't want to let it go or, give it over to automation, right? When in reality, you're still the one setting up those, keys and everything that it's going to do. So you're still the one in control. It's just like having a VA take care of it for you. Um, then you're taking that brain space and you're using it for processes that aren't really necessary.
Yeah, and you can also semi-automate, meaning if you do want to have some sort of control, like you said, we have fields that we can have either change automatically or even not change automatically. Just wait for human interaction and say, okay, you have to go in the morning. We'll create this view for you where you can see the ones that need follow up. And then you just click a checkbox or change the status, and that will send the email. If you want to do it semi automatically, it still
Right.
saves a lot of time. And I think the more people realize that you can let go to the automations and trust them, yes, they're going to be faults. There always are. It's a computer and it only does as well as you programmed it. That's what it knows how to do. But it's still saving you time most of the time. The one thing I would note though is you have to look at ROI for this, meaning I'm spending thousands of dollars on setting up automations, but I only have like one or two follow-up emails a month. Is it worth setting it up an automation for that? I don't think so. Again, if you're tech savvy and you can do it on your own, play with it. Absolutely set it up. And set it up when you're smaller rather than when you're big and need it, because then you have time to test it out and play with it and see that it's working according to what you need. And if there are errors, they're in a small scale. They're not on a big scale.
Right, for sure. And I think it really comes back to, fears that people have. And I was having a conversation with someone recently about this where people are afraid to let go. It's the same problem when it comes to delegation in people's businesses, right? They don't want to hand something over because I can do it better or I know how to do it like this. When in reality, there might be a much better way of doing it where you're still in control in the back end, but like you said, you're letting things take over in a way that there will be faults, just like if you hand it over to a human being and just like if you did it yourself. And that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that happening. It's, part of growing. It's not a
Yeah, but there are
failure
less
as long
faults.
as you learn from it. Right. And there are less
Right.
when we're not basing it on human, human error is definitely, bigger than when you set it in automation and say, okay, do this, do
Yeah.
that. It's going to follow that process.
Yeah.
Um, how does this concept change? We've spoken about so far, when it comes to having a sales pipeline as well as having a CRM and automating those processes. How does the sales pipeline and the CRM perhaps change if there are multiple offers that someone has?
So if you build it right, it shouldn't change. If there's multiple pipelines, you just have multiple pipelines and you put the client into the right pipeline based on whatever offer they want. But if it's the same pipeline, I still have to meet with them. I still have to send them a contract. I still have to send them a proposal. The automations are the same, they're just based on more variables. So I look at which offer they're taking. Are they taking offer A, offer B, or offer C? And then that will trigger the right template to send proposal or to send the contract based on the offer. Again, it really depends on the client, but one of the things that I teach my group program is you can have one offer or multiple offers in the same pipeline, and it makes the automations more complex, but at the end of the day it's the same idea.
Got it. So, in other words, especially because it's an automation and you're telling it which prompt or which specific offer, perhaps, and that would, I guess, go back to that checkbox idea of you having to go ahead and I'm not going to say the word, but go ahead and tick a box or whatever it might be in order for them to
Yeah.
the automations to kick in. So it'll just depend on which one you choose, as opposed to the whole process being able to just go on its own. There's going to have to be a little bit of human interaction in that.
Well, so if you think about the meeting, okay, and let's just assume it's a service provider that has a meeting with a potential customer before they sign them on.
Mm-hmm.
During that meeting, you find which offer is best for them. And if you're good at sales, you don't offer all of your offers. You figure out which offer is best for them and you offer one offer. And so again, we go back to that form that I talked about throughout the meeting. You're checking off these boxes. You're selecting, oh, okay, I'm going to offer them the one-to-one package. No, they're better for the group package. No, they're better for the 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever. So you select it from a drop down while you're on the meeting because you know what you offer them. And in the back end, we already have different fields that are filled out automatically based on what that offer entails because they change, right? So it's just a drop down and it saves you so much time. Yes, there's human interaction, but that human interaction is happening anyway. It's data entry, and we only enter one field as opposed to all the 5 or 6, because when I choose the offer, it changes the price. It may change the payment solution, right? Because if it's under 1,000, it's one payment. It's above 2,000, it's like 4 payments, whatever. So you define all of these things in the sales pipeline as you're going in the automations. And then when you just select the box, everything else just falls into place.
Interesting. So basically, you're saying that along with, let's say, a discovery call sheet that someone will have, they'll have their own inner form within the company where they're checking off boxes and then submitting that form. And that's going to be what triggers the automations to start taking effect.
That can be the trigger. It's going to fill the data. It makes data entry so much easier because, again, if you think of your call, the way that you're doing it now is you have multiple calls. And then at the end of the day, you sit down for 15 minutes and you have to remember, wait, what did I offer this person? What did I offer this person? And it's taking memory and space in your brain, even if you have Fathom. You have to review the call. Whereas if you're doing it at the end of the call, just by clicking some drop downs, oh, this is what I offered. If you have a manual override, like of the price, okay, I offered them a 10% discount, or I offered it for $10,000 or for $3,000, whatever it was. The amount of time, like if you just fill in that form and submit it at the end of the call, it takes you 2 minutes and you don't have to go back to it in the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's all about saving that space. Um, I always like to get practical on these podcasts in terms of, steps that we can take right away. But even before I ask you that question, what are some of the best tools to use when it comes to the conversation we've been having today?
Oh, that's a painful question because the answer is it depends. Like I can't
Right.
again, like with anything, just because your neighbor's sister's dog's cousin is using a tool does not mean it's going to be the right tool for you. I'm sorry. It's what are your needs? Are you tracking emails? Are you not tracking emails? Do you want to track text messages? Do you not want to track text messages? Do you even care? Do you have multiple offers? Do you have one offer? Do you have multiple pipelines? Do you have one pipeline? Again, any tool can handle these, but what are your needs? What other tech tools are you using? Are you using tools that you need to integrate with? Do you need to then, when you onboard them, you want to hit, one, and you want it to then create a project in your task management tool. So you need to find how it can talk to each other. So there's so many questions when you choose the right tool. And the answer is always test out multiple tools. All of these tools have like they're freemium based or they have a trial period. Try it out, have the same workflow, like build a pipeline, go to 3 or 4 different tools, put in that pipeline, see which one you like better. If your time runs out on a trial period, write them an email and say, I'm still testing this out. Can I have some more time? 9 times out of 10, they'll say yes. And a company that says no is not a company worth your time because they don't put the customers in the front anyway. So I would just stay away from them. Just how I work. So there is no one answer. What is the right tool? It's just whatever is right for you.
What are some of the different tools that people should be trying out when it comes to, different CRMs, when it comes to, you mentioned, earlier automations and trying to figure out these ideas or sales pipelines. What do you think are some of the places that people can go just to have like a starting process, somewhere to
Right.
begin their research, as it were?
So if you're looking for the CRM, I would try Copper and Pipedrive. Those are very good for small to medium businesses. They're very robust. Um, Pipedrive is now adding project management, but it's not up to par yet. But still, it's a great tool. Some of the tools have built-in workflows as well, so you can automate with like natively, which is always better than automating using a third-party tool. If you are deep in the Gmail space and you live in your Gmail inbox with the tasks and everything, check out Streak. It sits within your Gmail, so you don't have to go to another tool. Again, you have to know how to set it up and what your pipeline is. But the first step actually isn't choosing the tool. The first step is defining the different stages of your pipeline, defining the different offers, and understanding the pricing of each offer. Because once you know that, the rest is technical. That's where the thinking bit comes in. It's what are the different steps that my client goes through? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then as you start to work through them, you'll find that, wait, but there's a sub step here because I'm qualifying them. So let's add a qualification step. So the first step isn't choosing a tool. The first step is definitely defining what the different stages are and understanding your offer and pricing. Then we can choose a tool.
Got it. So there's a tremendous amount of, stuff they need to do before they ever get to the tools. But at least, when it comes to CRM, a good place to start would be, like you mentioned, copper, pipe drive, stuff like that. Um, you mentioned this earlier, so I want to come back to this. Um, some people just like, their notebooks. And yet, I'm definitely guilty of that to some degree, right? I have my own CRM, but I like writing down notes. It solidifies it in my head. One of the things that I like to tell people is you can have both, right? Meaning, to a certain degree, having everything in a digital space will be much easier so you don't, spill coffee on your notes and all of a sudden you can't read them anymore and you have no idea what you're supposed to do. But you can write down notes in terms of what's going on in meetings or who you're talking to, stuff like that. If that's, something that you prefer, what do you say to those people though? Do you agree with that? Or do you think it's just extra work?
To a certain degree, you can't take away what people like, but to those people, I usually recommend getting a Rocket Book or Remarkable 2, and it feels like you're writing in a notebook, and then you digitize it with the press of a button. Well, the Rocket Book, you have to take a photo with your phone and then upload it to the Google Drive, whatever. But definitely, you can still take your notes by hand, and then you can digitize them very easily, and so you don't lose them. That's like an interim way of doing it.
Nice little hack.
That's yeah, yeah. Some people like their notebooks. I have a client, she shows off to me and we fight about this all the time. She'll show me her notebook with lots of stickies on it, but it works for her. So, and we're still, systemizing everything, but she still
Right.
likes her notebook, which is fine.
Right. So ultimately, it's about finding, like, even within this conversation, and how we're saying, a lot of the time, it really does make sense to go digital. There still needs to be you within that process, right? And I think it's
100%.
so important for people to remember, which is why I asked the question, is that we need to remember why we do what we do, right? And if you don't love it, if you can't live with it, then you're just going to get burnt out from it. And then you're just going to throw it away and then you're not going to do it. And you're going to have spent all this time setting it up and working on it and creating all the automations in the world. But then it's just going to sit there because you can't handle it.
Yeah. I had a client like that. We set it up for her, but it was just before she was giving birth or whatever. And by the time she got back to it, she just didn't know how to get back to it. And the project was done. And I said to her, let's schedule a call. And I think we met once or twice even. And we walked through it step by step because it was set up to her specifications, but it takes time to learn. And if you're not willing to invest that time, you're not going to use it. Definitely, it has to be personalized to your needs. Not everyone does the same. The language is different. The timing is different. Like everybody needs to do what works for them and for their business.
Yeah, and it's something that, I mean, it comes back to these conversations that I think we always have when it comes to remembering that in business there are certain things that'll make it easier that, a lot of people do even, but it's about your individuality, right? At the end of the day, you need to be authentic to who you are. Don't try to be your next door neighbor, right? You said earlier, right? Don't try to be
Right.
the business next door. It's not going to do you any service. It's like going to someone who creates websites and saying, I want exactly this. No, 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 don't change it to fit me. I want it to look exactly like them. What are you doing? You might as well just give them the clients. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
like there needs to be you within that process. Otherwise, no one's going to be attracted to it.
Yeah. There was BBC had a television show of two women who would help other women, learn how to dress properly according to their body size. And they took 100 women and they put them in a size 14 Marks and Spencer's dress, which everybody has in their closet, whatever. And of the 100 women, maybe 12 looked good in that dress because we're all unique. We're unique in how we structure. So just because you can take something off the shelf doesn't mean that that's what's right for your business.
Right. And I think it's a great point. Just because it comes off the shelf doesn't mean that it's going to be right for you. I want to move into that practical realm that I mentioned I was going to come to. What are ways that people can just get started? Right? So many people, they struggle with just taking that first step. So I want to make it really easy for everybody. Let's give them those first steps that they can do. We mentioned what type of, CRMs to look at, but what are some of the first steps when it comes to looking at all these different things we've discussed today?
So the first step is really to define what are the different stages in your customer journey. So a client can reach out, right? Let's talk inbound. What are the different entry points? They can reach out through a LinkedIn DM, they can reach out through an email, they can reach out through a WhatsApp. Understand the different entry points that you have. And then what happens? Do you have an automated answer that comes out through LinkedIn, through DM, through text message, through email? Like, is there an automated thing? Oh, thank you. We've received your request. We'll get back to you. Most people don't. Do you want one? Do you need one? I don't know. You review it and then you want to reply to them saying, oh, great, let's meet. Here's a link to my scheduling tool. This is before you've touched the tool, but you have to understand what you do. And again, you're not making this up. You're looking at how it is that you go through your process day by day, every day. And once you understand what your process already is, you write it down in stages. And each one of those stages then becomes a stage in your pipeline. So, for example, after the meeting, you send a proposal. Okay, but then do you follow up? How often do you follow up? Do you follow up once? Do you follow up twice? Within how many days? Do you follow up after 2 days? After a week? When do you close it? When do you say, no, this is lost? Like you have to understand the different stages of your pipeline before you can choose a tool and go look at tools. And then once you have even the first 4 stages, the first 5 stages, now go into the different tools. You can check out Asana or ClickUp or Airtable. Airtable is very, very, very flexible and robust when it comes to setting up automations and calculations and relative to different dates and filling up fields automatically natively within the tool. It doesn't track emails, it doesn't track messages. So again, depending on what your needs are, put together a pipeline in each one of these tools. See which is easier for you. Which do you connect with more? Do you like the colors? Do you like the flow, the UX and the UI of the tool that you're choosing, the user experience that you're going through? You're going to live in this tool day in and day out in your business. If you don't like it, if you don't like how it flows, it's not going to work for you.
Right. And I think one of the things that you mentioned really stuck out for me, but I'm going to come back to that because the last thing you said also is extremely important in the sense that also the UX UI is something that's important to look at, right? I didn't even think of that myself until you had said it. And it was something that I did automatically when I went through that process for me. But for a lot of people, like you said, you need to be attracted to what you're doing, not just from an interface of, okay, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that, but also just the way it looks. It needs to look good and you're going to be excited about it. But one of the things I think that you said that really touched me was even if you only have the first few stages, start with that. Because I
Yeah.
think a lot of businesses, and I mentioned this in my opening lines, is a lot of people make it up until it doesn't work anymore. And a lot of people don't know how often they should be following up. They just, whatever, I do it differently every single time. Right. And at some point, yes, it's very good to figure out what the right system could be. And there are people to reach out to, like myself, even where you can ask simple questions like that. And we won't charge you to just, hi, how often should I follow up based on this is the situation? And we're happy to help you. But even if you're just making it up, you could still put it into a pipeline as, I follow up between these and these amount of times. And you could figure out how to make that tighter and tighter as you go along. And sometimes having a CRM will actually make it easier for you to figure out what makes the most sense.
And you shouldn't be setting up automations right away. Automations
Yeah,
come at
for
the
sure.
end. Like I'm telling you again with my group program, and I had people that it teaches the basics. We don't touch tools until week 3, and we don't touch automations until like week 5. It's just not that they come out of 8. Yeah, so 5 or 6 out of 8.
Right.
Automations come at the end when you know that everything is set up the way that you want it to be set up. You don't the purpose is not to automate blindly to get it off my hands. No. The idea is to understand what your process is first. And that's a huge step. Most people don't realize what it is because they do it by rote. And like you said, oh, this one I think I'll follow up to 3 days because it was a good conversation. This one, not such a good conversation. Maybe I'll follow up sooner. Maybe I'll follow up later. Like it doesn't work that way. You have to have, there has to be a process to it because again, that brain space, which is so, so, so expensive, that's real estate in your brain. And it's being taken up by stuff that it shouldn't be.
Right. And I think another point that you mentioned was the fact that, and I mentioned this also in one of my points, when you don't even realize that you have it, but most people have a pipeline one way or another. It just might not be a structured pipeline in the sense where you have done it intentionally, right? Because when someone reaches out to you, that's, usually stage one, right? Then you're going to have to qualify that lead. So you decide, hey, are these people going to really be a good client for me or not? And then you're going through all these processes anyways till they all of a sudden close. That is your pipeline, right? And so many people forget the fact that really they have one without ever realizing that that's actually going on. And, it's important, like you said, have clarity in terms of who is good for you. Where are you going to find them? What are you supposed to say to them? How are you supposed to say it? All of these things come before any conversation about, the tool. And then long before, once you have that tool, making sure that you really have it whittled down as far as it can go before you start trying to automate it. So I think those are extremely important points, especially because a lot of freelancers and small business owners could benefit from really having some of these tools, but they don't need to go all the way, right? It doesn't mean that you need to go from 0 to 100 immediately, right? You can go from 0 to 30 and just start slow, right? You're going down a one way. There's no reason to crank it up, and just figure it out as you go along. I think that's an important part as
Yeah.
well.
So yes, and also I would say as you're figuring it out, for example, you send a proposal. Okay. What does your proposal look like? Do you have a template for it? Does it change based on the offer? And when you want to automate this, you have to have some basic structure. We can have variables, and the variables can be paragraphs long. They don't have to be one line or just one word. But is there a structure? Expiration date, cost, due dates, milestones. Like, what are the different stages that you're going through? This is for your contract. This is for your proposals, for your statements of work. Understand, like, have a template ready. First of all, even if you don't automate them, if you still can do it like by hand, it'll make it easier for you because then you're just copying and pasting the different variables. You know what the structure is. Don't start from scratch every time because then what have we done? You'll wait, what did I want to write here? Okay, then what did I want to write? It just doesn't work.
Right. And it's mind boggling to me. I had this with a client just the other day. Like they were going over their proposal and I realized that I was like, are you doing your proposals fresh every single time? They're like, no, I copy this piece and that piece. I was like, you need we need, no.
No, no,
it
just no.
wasn't just no, right? It
Just no.
wasn't
Just
that they
no.
were copying, the whole thing and they had one. You need to have a template structured out if you're sending out a proposal. And there should be like a paragraph, maybe two, that you're just putting in like the scope of work for this particular client. And even then, most of the time, you can literally copy and paste those because you're going to see there's usual packages that people are going to want that you can have preset. And it was a process till they finally, were able to do this, but it was so powerful for them to get that brain space back. But most people don't even realize where they're doing this, right? It's not just in what are the stages you're doing. It's not just in who are you talking to. It's also even in as simple as creating a proposal, right? Your pricing, all of the things that you're doing every single day require a look at to say, is this something that I'm taking too much time to do? Right?
Yes.
This podcast is a great example of that. I literally plug in a template for the live podcast that I have pre-made that I tweak it every once in a while because it's a living, breathing thing that I constantly change. And I just plug in certain parts of it that need to change, like my guest, the name, simple things that are going to change the questions that I want to ask every single episode. Everything else stays the same. There's no reason to like reinvent the wheel every single time when if you want things to be simple, if you want them to be easy, good, and enjoyable, creating those processes and structures are so.
Even in the podcast that you just mentioned, you have the same things that you copy and paste over. But if you did it with the click of a button through Zapier, it's pulling it from your CRM and it's pushing it into the template. And the template creates itself. You save time on that as well. Again, I don't know that you're at that stage because it depends on how many episodes you have, at what rate,
Right.
and is it worth investing in. But even that, everything that you're doing, anything that has data entry, you should not be entering data more than once. And preferably put any data entry on the client when they're booking. They can fill out a form and that's it.
Right, 100%. And the interesting thing is that the first stage to that, like we said before, having that template is that first stage, right? And only then, once you have the information, can you then say, okay, great, I want them to enter this information, and it depends on how your process might be more complicated than others, and can I use those different things? But it's all about trial and error. Try to figure it out. Try to see where you can go and see where it's going to take you. Because the worst case scenario, it doesn't work for you, and you take a step back, right? That's not
Yeah.
a failure. That's a learning step, right? Because as long as you learn from the mistake and you realize why didn't it work, you'll be able to take that, learn from it, and move forward with it.
Yeah, we've had times where we've set it up in one system and it was really great. It was working really great. And then we hit a snag and just something that we couldn't do anymore. And it was major. And we said, no, we have to go back to the drawing board and find a better tool. And like you said, it's not a failure, it's a learning experience because as we were developing, we figured out what was more important to us.
Right.
And you'll learn that as you go. If you don't start anywhere, you won't do it. You mentioned before about business owners working in the business and not on the business. You should have, I want to say at least 10%, probably more of your time working on the business. You should be carving out and blocking your calendar for time to work on the business. And if you're not, then your business is going to get stuck very, very fast.
100%. This has been fantastic. I want to open the floor to questions and answers. This way, people can have an opportunity to ask you any questions they might have. I've put into the chat. You can also, just tell us what you're stuck on today, and we can see if we can help you. Or in terms of just, if you could ask one question about the topic we spoke about, by all means. We're going to give a minute here, as we always do, for people to put their questions into the comments, and then, we'll address those questions.
Yeah, some people have dropped off, which is a shame. They could have asked some questions, but
Yeah, it always happens.
yeah.
Okay, so one of the questions that came in, which I think is very interesting. So we did touch on this to a certain degree. This particular client, they've tried to really figure out how to structure the different offers that they're doing. But ultimately, when it comes to taking that next step, they keep hitting a brick wall. How do they know when it's the right time to speak to a professional like yourself, or whether they need to look at some, maybe there's free resources or things that they can look at in order to see, like, where are they even wrong here?
If they've hit a brick wall, it depends on how tech savvy they are and how much time they want to invest. You can do the research yourself. You can read up on the internet. Everything is available for free. There is nothing I can teach you that you cannot learn on the internet for free. I have experience, which you can't get on the internet for free. But, there's nothing I can teach you that you cannot learn for free. The question is, how much time do you want to invest learning this? This is true of any, like I can write my own copy. I could theoretically use Canva to do design. Is it going to be the same quality? Is it going to be the same speed? No. You go to an expert when you're like, I've hit the brick wall. I've tried multiple times. Okay, let's go to a pro, especially when you have multiple offers, because you have a certain way of thinking of your offers. It's the way that you structured it in your mind. You're not always thinking about it from a client perspective or the other way around. You're thinking about it from a client perspective. You're not thinking about it from a business perspective. And that shift often opens up doors that we can't get to it on our own. We have to talk to someone to get the answer.
Right. A lot of times it does require having that sounding board, even just to, flush things out. I find that for myself in my own
Yeah,
business. But like you said, like the reason a lot of times to go to an expert is, like you said, you have that expertise, which is, you know, $1 for cutting the wire, 999 for knowing which wire to cut.
exactly.
But a lot of people, they offer, free consultations for a couple of minutes here or there, where a lot of the issues that I think, people face, like, the person asking this question, you can get time with someone in a limited fashion, of course, whether it's 30 minutes or depending on how, giving different people are with their time. There are ways of getting in front of professionals where they could take a look. And if it's something simple, great. They can, within 30 minutes fix that problem just like that. Um, if it's not, so then you might need to bring them on, which is the whole point of having that conversation to begin with. Because if you need to have that conversation, if you need their input, that's where you're going to figure out, this is the right person for me. This is the right thing that I need to do, as opposed to just, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Right. So it's about moving out of that, I think.
So it's interesting that you said that. I had a phone conversation this morning. I have a 30-minute free call, and it was someone in the marketing space, and they had this automation that things were taking weeks to get to them. And within 10 minutes, I gave her the solution. I said to her, if you hire me, it'll cost you thousands. If you hire someone for five, or it'll cost you, maybe 100, because just the workflow was so simple. It was a technical issue. And as far as she was concerned, she said, well, 10 minutes in and I'm done. I have the answers that I want. Sometimes that's all you need. You just need someone who sees it differently, who's looked at it from a different perspective, and who has that experience. I'm not saying I can always do that. Often I can't, and I usually don't give full solutions because they're so complex. But when it's a
Right.
simple solution, why not?
Right. 100%. I always like to point out as we get to the end of the live podcast, try to take at least one thing away from today that you're going to put into implementation. If that means, from today's conversation, really getting, your stuff, your clarity on what it is that you're doing and the processes that you have so that you can start moving at least towards the CRM or towards automations, whichever level you're at, do that. Whatever it is, pick that one thing that really spoke to you today and try to move towards actually implementing it. I wanted to hand the floor over to you, actually, Mrs. Levy, because you had mentioned that you had an offer that you wanted to give to everyone here or listening today. Um, Take that away. Go ahead.
So the thing about setting up your sales pipeline, like we talked about just now, is oftentimes you need support from someone outside. You need someone to ask you all of those questions. You need someone to help you figure out the tool. You can do it yourself. You're tech savvy enough, but it will take you 5 days to do it as opposed to like 5 hours to do it, or as opposed to 5 minutes to do it if you have someone who will help you and point you in the right direction. And that's why I put together a group program to help people amplify their sales pipeline. Basically, we review everything that we've talked about today. We review the different stages, we review the different offers, we review the different pricing options, we review the different software. We talk about templates, we talk about emails, we talk about follow-ups, we talk about integrations and automations. We put all the pieces together. The idea of this program is that it's within a group environment, so you have accountability and you have weekly live Q&A sessions to answer all the questions. Basically, that's me on speed, because like yes, it's in a group environment, but you learn from other people's questions and you have questions of your own.
Right.
Plus, there are bonus sessions on how to use different tools and how to access them and make the most of them. I actually also have a DIY version of this, but honestly, I think that the group program is so much more effective because it gives you that accountability. And so many people have said, yes, I want to work on my business, but I just don't have the time. I'll buy the course. It's, a couple $100. Okay. And it's sitting there in my inbox. And now what? Whereas when you have a group program and you have live sessions and recorded sessions that you can watch again and again and the transcripts and everything, but you have homework that you have to hand in at the end of every week, it makes it so that you're working on your business whether you want to or not, because you want to make the most of whatever you've paid for.
Right, 100%. We've put a link to that in the chat as well. And I've also put my own contact information. If you loved or liked this live podcast, we speak about something that is timely or interesting that you can add to your skill set toolbox every single week that we come on here. And if for whatever reason you need to ask me any questions, you can hit me up for a 30-minute free strategy session to take your sales game to the next level. They do move quickly, so book it while you can, and you can send me a WhatsApp as well if you have a simple question. Again, Irit, thank you so much for coming to the live podcast. It was so impactful. I have notes myself, and I'm sure that there are so many people that are listening and that are going to watch this later that are going to benefit from this. So thank you very much for sharing this valuable information with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. I can talk about this stuff for hours.
Most definitely. I know the two of us have definitely done that in the past. And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to people being able to have proper impactfulness from that, being able to listen to this. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And until next week, have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.